Hey everyone. So I'm gonna share the story around my diagnosis of type 1 diabetes, and it was pretty rough. Not necessarily the diagnosis itself, but the night before I actually finally went to the hospital. It was my high school's homecoming dance, my sophomore year homecoming dance. I had just turned 15 a month prior, and so this is a little bit later than normal type 1 diabetics. I think on average, I think the diagnosis age is usually a little bit younger than that. And so at this point, I was my normal my at this point I was around 95 pounds, and my normal weight I'm pretty sure it was around 125. That's just basing off what my weight got up to a few months later, pretty much immediately. And that 125 was I was a lean, I was, physically active. That was a lean weight for me. So losing an additional 30 pounds, I looked pretty bad. I looked like a skeleton. Remember the homecoming dance picture. I looked awful. I looked like basically a skeleton. And I remember the suit or tux. I don't know what I was wearing. Probably I think it was just a simple suit of some kind. I don't know if I've worn it before. It was just a suit that we had. I didn't go get fitted for anything for this dance, and but I had tried it on, and assuming I'd be going, and it fit, a month prior fine. And I think I rapidly lost weight pretty much that previous month or so of being diagnosed. Although, the high blood sugars I'm sure started long before that. By the time the dance came, that it was so oversized for me. I shrunk. I just felt like I shrunk, and the pants. There's no way the pants were staying up. I had to, dig another hole in a belt, the belt that I was using, just to make it tight enough. So I was extremely underweight. And I'll just mention this. So my anxiety, I've stated this in maybe in my first video that I had huge social anxiety as a child. And this, I think, was my first time asking a girl out or to a dance ever, and it was almost like 100% guarantee. Like it was already known she knew that I was going to ask her, just but I didn't know her too well, and so it was just kind of friends, you know, talking about it. So she like and telling me that she's going to say yes. So it was one of the more easier things to do for a normal kid, I would assume. But man, I almost blacked out asking her. Like I'm so uncomfortable reaching out for anything, asking anything like that. And as a kid, especially with other females, it was just not it was not something I was comfortable with. And yeah, so I it was a very nerve-wracking thing to do for me. I swear I almost like passed out, and it was just a quick, "Will you go to the dance with me?" She said yes. She was very beautiful and unbelievably nice person. And I was like, okay, and I just walked away, and I hardly talked to her much leading up to the dance because that's just how I was. I was not very good with things like that, and I'm just bringing that up because it kind of goes into my experience of that night and how I just never feel comfortable reaching out to anybody ever. Even with something as drastic as what was occurring that night for me, I couldn't ask for help. I just didn't have the ability. Even I had good friends, but even with my friends, I was never the one who was able to call and talk to them or say, "Do you want to hang out?" It was I always had to be called, which of course makes me likely look like I'm not interested or like I'm an asshole of some kind. But it's just something that I've never been able to do, and that's one of the things that I'm of course, been working on throughout my life, but more so the past few years specific to healing diabetes. So, like I said, leading up to the dance, about a month or so leading up to the dance is when I lost the majority of the weight and also extreme thirst and having to go to the bathroom, urinate constantly. And this evening was, this is the day before we finally went to the hospital. We went to the hospital the next day, and so it was the worst it ever was as far as having to just horrible thirst to the point where if I didn't get water or drink water quicker than 15 minutes, my throat would feel like it was seizing up. Like I was so dehydrated to where, like I said, if I didn't get water, was able to drink something within, if it ever spaced out more than 15 minutes or so, I couldn't, I don't want to say that I couldn't breathe, but it was getting to that point where it's like, oh my God, like I felt so tight. My entire body was like clenching up and so dehydrated that I needed something. And every time I drank, it was like, thank goodness, but I never really fully got quenched. It was just a very quick relief, but it did not last long. And having to basically the water I drank just flew straight through my body, and I had to pee it out 10 to 15 minutes later, and there was no ability not to. I could not hold it. And it's one of those things where I don't remember if I myself noticed that I had lost so much weight. If you see yourself every day, you don't notice the gradual changes. But I must have. I just don't really have a good memory. I do remember, I don't know at what point in time, likely that last week, it was discussed. I remember my dad actually mentioning diabetes because I don't see him. I see him maybe I think it was like every other weekend, possibly. So he noticed. I'm sure. I just don't remember. My mom, I'm sure, noticed it, but she saw me every day, so it's not that it doesn't have that major impact where one day all of a sudden you see this big difference. So I'm guessing that's why it took so long for me to actually get to the hospital. But my older brother, had come home that weekend from college and he saw me and he didn't say anything to me. He just kind of pulled my mom aside and was like, what is happening? Is he okay? So that kind of made it pretty obvious to my mom before that. But then, of course, when I came home from the dance the next day and told her what happened, then of course we finally went to the hospital. So I'll explain the activities of that night. So I went with another couple to just this older classy hotel with a restaurant, and we had dinner there before going to the dance, and someone else was driving. Like I said, very shy kid, very difficult for me to talk to people who I don't know, and I was with three people that I essentially didn't know. And on top of that, I was going through these physical symptoms, and I knew everyone was looking at me like, what the heck is wrong with this kid? What, not in a bad way, but just like it was obvious. And I would have to I would guzzle a glass of ice water every 10 minutes, or as long as it was available to me. I would have to just drink it all. And the waiter kept filling me up. And eventually, like seriously, within like 30 minutes, he just left the pitcher on the table because he was tired of having to keep coming. I don't know if he was necessarily tired, but he was just like, okay, this guy's thirsty. I'll just leave him the pitcher. And I just continually drank, and every 10 to 15 minutes left the table, had to go to the bathroom. Sometimes, the pitchers weren't coming fast enough, and so while I was in the bathroom, I would guzzle water out of the sink, and it was just that repetitive cycle. Every 10 to 15 minutes, have to pee it out, then guzzle as much water as I could, and then do it again 10 to 15 minutes later. And I wasn't like I said, this obviously isn't a normal thing. I didn't know what to think of it, but I couldn't talk. I wasn't able to discuss it. I couldn't. I just wanted to kind of like hide in myself. I don't know. I don't know if I said any words during the dinner. Like it had to have been very awkward. But it's one of those things we're going through those physical things, feeling awkward. The anxiety wasn't actually. It was certainly there, but it was kind of on the back burner. I couldn't really focus on that. I just felt so shitty that it just wasn't really a big focus of mine. Although I still was in a very big panic mode, just wondering how the heck I'm going to get through this night, and really just wanting to go home. And but again, not being able to say that to anybody. Towards the end of the dinner, we had to drive to the high school where the dance was, and I we were somewhat close, but with traffic, I was guessing it would be about a 10 to 15-minute drive. And so I was panicking, like, man, I'm not going to be able to hold this, and I'm going to have to go to the bathroom. Like, please, please, God, let us get there quickly. And at this point, I was trying to hold, each time I was trying to hold the pee in for as long as I could because it was embarrassing to have to continually go to the bathroom every 10 to 15 minutes. And so that muscle that you tighten to hold it was completely shot. It was exhausted. I couldn't. Just imagine clenching that muscle for an hour straight and see how you feel. Like it was completely shot. So like it just got worse and worse. Where when I had that feeling of having to go, I like it was almost like hopeless. Like I couldn't. I didn't have the strength down there to keep it in. So I was really scared about getting to the high school in time. And we got there, and I was holding as tightly as I could. We got out of the car. I just wanted to run into the school to go to the bathroom, but I just was walking with them. We walked around the corner of the school to get to the entrance, and I see there's this big line waiting outside the door because they haven't opened the doors yet. And again, I'm in a panic, and I don't know what to do. I'm sitting there just listening to them talk. I don't remember saying a word this entire night. I'm sure I did, if they asked me a question, but I was so distracted with things going on. Plus, on top of that, I wouldn't really be speaking much anyways. And so I was in my head just not knowing what to do. I was clenching as tight as I could, and it wasn't working anymore. Like it was squirting out, and I couldn't do anything about it. And so once it, a little bit came out, luckily I had, a dark suit on, dark or black pants. I just, I said, I'll be right back. And I just took off quickly through the parking lot. And there was, there's at the end of the parking lot, there was a railing, a few trees, but it's not like I could go in and hide. But I just went behind a tree. There were definitely cars pulling in, headlights shining on me all the time as I peed, just in next to the parking lot, and felt a huge. I remember feeling that relief, like feeling, you know, every 10 to 15 minutes having to pee this badly. The feeling of being able to finally do it was always wonderful, but just knowing that it was going to come back was pretty bad. So was finally able to do that, rejoin them in the line, and it took a while. I remember because even though I hadn't drinking anything since the last pee, I still needed to go, and so it was we finally were allowed in. They finally opened the doors, and I immediately went to the bathroom once again. And so as far as the how the dance went, I know I danced with her here and there, but it was just so difficult. What I remember most was just standing by where they had I remember standing by like the punch bowl because that's the only thing they had to drink there, which was horrible, just putting more sugar in me. But at the time, I had no idea what was going on. So I would just stand by there and just constantly drink more and more, basically sugar water. I do know, like, I had a couple close friends, and they, the fact that I don't say anything, it's awkward for them to say anything. It's just how that works, I guess. But I could tell that they were concerned, because they were just kind of keeping an eye on me. But I never said anything. I was too embarrassed to mention what the heck's going on, because for one, I didn't really know. I didn't really understand what was going on. But like I said, all I wanted to do was go home. But I couldn't. I didn't have that ability to tell anybody what was going on, like that I'm scared and that I need to go. So through the course of the dance, it was just drinking. I remember trying to drink water out of a water fountain, but it was one of those, you know, I think this high school had a horrible water fountain where the water barely comes out, so I couldn't really get much out of there. So it was really drinking the fruit punch and then going to the bathroom, peeing, and then guzzling water out of the sink in the bathroom as many times as I could. And that's how the dance went. Then, unfortunately, like afterwards, our plan was to sleep over at a friend's house, and there was maybe, I don't know, 15 to 20 people total there. And we just all kind of slept on the living room floor watching a movie. And at this point, I was in a daze basically. I didn't know, I couldn't focus on anything. I couldn't talk to anybody. I felt like complete shit, and I just kept to myself on one side of the living room that was closest to the entrance, I think, to the kitchen and the bathroom, where I could just keep going back and forth, drinking water and going to the bathroom. And eventually, everyone's falling asleep. I remember having just this like small blanket and like a couch pillow on the floor. And the other thing about losing so much weight is I was freezing. I was absolutely freezing, and so I didn't get a second of sleep, of course, but I was shaking uncontrollably under this small blanket I had, and then at the same time having to get up every 10 to 15 minutes, go to the bathroom, chug water out of the sink. And I do remember this sink. I think they had really soft water, so I couldn't get. I don't know. It didn't allow me to feel fully quenched drinking that water, so I instead just went to the kitchen and that had a better stream of water, I guess, and I just chugged that. But every 10 to 15 minutes throughout the entire night, having to get up, go pee, chug water, come back, and freeze, shake under this blanket, and knowing that everybody, I don't know if people were, I'm assuming people were asleep, but maybe not, but I'm sure everyone noticed, obviously, that I was doing that the entire night. But again, never said a word. I didn't know how. I just went through it, and eventually, finally, the morning came and got picked up, got home, explained to my mom what was going on, and we finally went to the hospital. So that's basically the story I wanted to share, just to give an idea of how that experience went for me. Once I got to the hospital, I don't know how long I stayed there, a few days, maybe a week. I'm not really positive. I don't really remember much of it. Obviously, we did all the tests and the type 1 diabetes education and all of that. The one thing I do remember is my first injection of insulin that they gave me. They had a really hard time finding a spot to give it to me, because I think normally they would do it in the patient's stomach, and they couldn't do it. There wasn't an ounce of fat on me. They couldn't. Everything was so sucked in and tight that they couldn't lift the skin up enough to be able to give my injection in my stomach. I don't remember where they ended up doing it. Maybe the butt. I have no idea, but that stands out. I definitely remember that. And the rest of the time was just doing the standard stuff as far as trying to get my blood sugar under control. I was definitely at least happy to be there and finally get to feeling better. And I think I said this in an earlier video, just I was definitely afraid of needles, so that was not a good, that part of it was definitely not a good experience. I may have said it took me about a month to get to a point where I could give the injection myself, but honestly, it could have been longer than that. I really don't remember that. That was out of everything, that was the hardest thing for me. I just was not able to do it myself, and so that took me longer than probably the average kid for some reason. I really hated needles. So what a great disease to get. But that's how it went. Obviously, it could have went so much worse, and I'm very grateful that everything ended up working out. So, but that was my story, and I thought it was pretty interesting. So, thank you for listening.